Nancy here. She's going to talk about the Kokee issue, which a lot of people thought went away, but unfortunately it hasn't. Auntie Nancy.
Yeah, I'm afraid I have some bad news. We, probably all of you, were involved about a year and a half ago when we, as a community, really found out that the master plan had been moving along for a couple of years without us really knowing what was in it. We all came together. There were thousands of emails and letters, and everyone was really mobilized, and it was a wonderful thing because our community really spoke with one voice. Last February, David Boynton, Kay Halani, Kay Kua, Margaret Ezekiel, and myself spent hundreds of hours going through the master plan that had been proposed and created a Ho'opono plan, which we call the Community Master Plan, basically trying to be consistent with community's comments. I think the community was speaking with such a unified voice that it was really pretty simple to know what the community wanted. So we presented that to Peter Young, who was the head of the DLNR at the time, on February 8th, and we lost David on the 10th of February. And we really never heard back. And we presented also to Ron and Gore at the same meeting. And so we really didn't know what was going on, and Peter Young is no longer the head of DLNR, and we have a new director, Laura Thielen. She met with us, with myself and Margaret Ezekiel, in November. One of the things I can, to her credit, I think I can tell you, is that she's very candid. She didn't try to pretend that they were in any way interested in our community plan. She was very direct about her feeling that DLNR needed additional funds and that they needed for all kinds of things, harbors and enforcement and all sorts of things, and that the best way she felt to get that money into a fund that DLNR would control would be to suck as much money out of our premier state parks as possible. Identifying, of course, Kokee and Waimea Canyon as the #1 park. So I had written a history of what had gone on, tried to give her kind of a bullet point summary of our community master plan, had written her a pretty detailed letter about the community's response, etc. And she actually pushed it all back across the table and said, you know what you can really do for us, if you really want to help us to come up with other ideas to generate funds from Kokee and Waimea Canyon State Parks. So that's really where we're at right now. There are several things that are going to be coming up in the next 2.5 months, I think, maybe even sooner. One of the bright lights is that Senator Hooser did introduce a couple of pieces of legislation that we hoped would be introduced, and they have so far survived. One of them is to, interestingly enough, clarify the statute that already says that the primary purpose of the state park system is to preserve the state parks in a natural state to the maximum extent possible, given, the enjoyment of the public. So we're asking that they add another line to just say, really, that conservation values need to be the predominant values over public use. If ever those two values conflict, that we need to really conserve and protect our state parks. It's unfortunate that we really even need to ask them to add that line, but there you have it. Interestingly, also, Laura Thielen did show up and apparently testified vigorously against it. So, yeah, the DLNR, in the DLNR master plan for Kokee and in our conversations, it's clear that they don't read that language, the existing language, the same way that we do. So that's why we felt it was important to get that clarified by adding really to that statute. So at some point, we're hoping everyone will start becoming aware of this legislation and helping us to testify. It's gone through the Senate and is crossing over to the House. there's a companion House bill that was introduced by Representative Sagum that's identical, that's going to be, I think, crossing from House to Senate. It gets confusing for me too, but at some point I'm hoping that we will know when and where to send some testimony on this. Now the second piece of legislation, excuse me? Oh, it's not the plan. This is the legislature I'm talking about at this point. I'm going to go back to the master plan in a second. The other piece of legislation could be brilliant if it worked, but I'm not sure if it's going to work. It's asking that all of the monies raised in Kokee and Waimea stay in a fund for Kokee and Waimea Canyon. It sounds like a no-brainer for the community, but it is absolutely radical as far as the state park system goes. The monies raised in the state parks generally go into a fund that's used statewide. So this would really be fairly radical. There is a similar statute that allows a percentage of monies that are raised at Diamond Head to stay there. So I think that this legislation, if we could get them to insert 100% of the funds staying in Kokee, would do two things. One, it would remove that incentive for the state to try to commercialize the park to the maximum extent possible. And the other is it would provide a fund to actually repair and maintain Kokee, which we actually could use. There are lots of things making money in the park right now. There's the restaurant and the other concessions and that sort of thing, and there are the leases. Our group, the SaveKokee.org, didn't deal with the leases. There's other legislation dealing with that, which I know not as much about, so I'm not addressing that issue. But as far as commercializing the parks, I think this would be a wonderful thing. So those two pieces of legislation have passed both sides, as far as I can tell. And in the next couple of weeks, we'll be really in a position to become legislation that we mobilize. So back to the master plan. The master plan is being revised by staff at the DLNR, which is where it really originated, where all those ideas to commercialize originated. I think they haven't really spent much time looking at our community master plan. I'm not certain about that. I've been in touch with Ron Gore. He says that it will be on Kauai. There'll be a meeting on Kauai soon. He said toward the end of the legislative session, which is April-ish, I think. And it'll be on Kauai. Okay. It'll be on Kauai, presumably. He says he can't get a hold of this revised plan yet, although he's on the board of Land and Natural Resources. I'm hoping that we'll get that soon and get that out to all of you. So, bottom line is, pay attention, if you would, to, we'll probably end up writing a letter to the editor. We have SaveKokee.org, and that's a segue into we need volunteers desperately. So if anyone understands how to deal with computers and websites and emails and all of that, we could really use your help. We could also use help with phone calling. As soon as we know when there's going to be a hearing, we really need to get everybody there. It will be the time that they will decide and they will adopt this master plan. It's the next meeting of the BLNR that deals with it. So we're at the end of this road. Okay?